My boyfriend proposed to another woman, using my bank cards, eating my cooking, and telling me he wasn't ready for marriage yet. Can you believe it? He said I was the kind of girl men settle for when they fail. But not him. Then, he showed up at my door months later with a shocking offer. 3 years of my life. Poof. Gone. And I'm stuck cleaning up a financial disaster. I gotta vent before I lose it completely. I met Ramsey on what should have been the most boring day ever. I was on Amtrak, heading to Chicago to see my sis, when bam, the train hit something. No derailment or anything, but enough to mess up the train and leave us stranded in the boonies of Pennsylvania. They bussed us all to this dinky town to wait it out, like, 8 freaking hours. This town had one diner, one bar, and a convenience store. The diner was packed. So I ended up at the bar with my bag. Ordered a sad excuse for a sandwich, and texted my sister that I was gonna be late. Ramsey was a couple of seats down, also with luggage. He joked about how the universe really wanted us to experience small town life. I laughed, 'cause he was kinda cute, tall, with messy dark blonde hair and nice hands. I always fall for nice hands, don't ask me why. We started chatting, turns out we were going to the same general area. He was interviewing for a job, said he was over the corporate rat race and wanted to build something real. I told him I worked in logistics, not exactly thrilling, but stable. After a few hours and a couple of beers, we swapped numbers. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. But he texted me the next day, and we grabbed coffee when I got back from my sister's. He didn't get that job, but he had another one lined up, or so he said, and another after that. Always something big coming, always almost landing the perfect gig. At first, I didn't sweat it. The job market sucks, and he was charming as hell. 6 months later, his lease was up. My place was bigger, closer to downtown, and I was already paying for most of our dates since he was between opportunities. So, when he suggested moving in, it made sense, or so I thought. That's when things started to get wild. The first month, he paid his share of the rent, no problem. By the second month, he was a week late. By the third, he had this whole sob story about a delayed freelance check. But he promised to cover next month's rent, plus what he owed. I let it slide. I could handle the rent myself, barely, but Ramsey was home all day networking and building his portfolio, so at least the apartment was clean and dinner was usually ready when I got home. I kept telling myself it was temporary. The excuses got crazier. The startup he was consulting for had accounting issues. A client was late paying, the project got extended. Always something just out of his control, always with a solution right around the corner. Meanwhile, my bank account was shrinking faster than my patience. I started working extra shifts and picked up weekend inventory work. Ramsey would give me back rubs when I got home, exhausted, and tell me how amazing I was and how he'd make it up to me when his career took off. My friend Phelan was the first to call me out. We were grabbing coffee, and I mentioned skipping a concert because I was broke. She gave me this look and asked how long I planned to fund Ramsey's lifestyle. I got defensive, said we were a team, that relationships have ups and downs, that he'd do the same for me. But her words stuck with me. I started paying closer attention, noticed how often he used my Visa for small stuff without asking, how my grocery bill had doubled since he moved in, but my fridge seemed emptier, how he always had money for new games or drinks with his friends, but never for bills. Once, I brought up marriage, just casually, after my cousin got engaged, and he looked like I'd asked him to jump off a bridge. He said he wasn't ready, that marriage was serious business, that we had a good thing going. Why rush? I didn't push it, but I should have. Then, out of nowhere, things got weirdly better for a month or so. Ramsey started going out more, said he was meeting with potential clients, going to networking events, catching up with old contacts. He seemed energized, said things were finally coming together. I wanted to believe him so bad. Then, one Friday, my friend M texted me asking if I wanted to grab dinner with her and her boyfriend. Ramsey had already told me he had a networking thing, so I agreed to meet them solo. I got to the restaurant early. M was acting sus, kept checking her phone, giving me these weird, pitying looks. Finally, her boyfriend, R, showed up and immediately started talking about some tech event he'd been to the night before. Then he dropped the bomb, asked if Ramsey had enjoyed the open bar, mentioned seeing him there with his fiancée. My face must have said it all because they both went silent. M pulled out her phone, started apologizing, saying she didn't know if she should show me, but she'd seen something on Instagram that morning that didn't make sense. She handed me her phone. It was some woman's profile I didn't recognize, a blonde named Clover. Her latest post was from the night before, string lights, champagne glasses, and her hand with a freaking diamond ring. The caption said, I said, yes. Can't believe I get to marry my soulmate. I scrolled through her profile, posts of them going back at least a month, captions about my man and date night with the love of my life. In one, they were at the beach from 2 weekends before when Ramsey had told me he was visiting his parents upstate. I excused myself from dinner, told M&R I'd call them later, and went straight home and checked our shared credit card account on my phone. Found charges for restaurants I'd never been to, a hotel downtown from 3 weeks ago, a jewelry store charge from last week, $2,800. That's when it hit me, he'd bought her ring with my money. I sat by the window in our apartment, scrolling through all the evidence until it got dark. Around 9 p.m., I heard his key in the lock. He came in, kicked off his shoes like it was any other night, went straight to the fridge, and grabbed a beer that I'd paid for. I asked him where he'd been. Just networking, he said, making connections, things are looking up. Then I asked if he'd gotten engaged recently. You should have seen his face, first shock, then this weird smirk like he was almost impressed I'd found out. When I asked if he'd proposed to that blonde girl from the photos, he just shrugged, said something like, "Look, can we not do this now? I don't owe you anything." I was shaking with rage. "You spent my money, lived with me, and proposed to someone else." I screamed loud enough that the neighbors probably heard. And that's when he dropped the ultimate bomb, the thing I can't get out of my head. He rolled his eyes, took a swig of beer, and said, "Come on. You really thought I'd give you a ring? You're the kind of girl men settle for when they fail." I didn't fail at all. I don't even remember deciding to hit him, but suddenly my fist connected with his chest. Hard. He stumbled back, spilling beer on his shirt. Before he could even react, I slapped him across the face, leaving a bright red mark on his cheek. I told him to get the hell out, to pack his stuff and leave. He tried to argue, said I was overreacting. I grabbed his backpack from the hook by the door and started shoving whatever I could reach into it. His charger from the counter, some t-shirts from the clean laundry pile. Threw it at him, and told him if he wasn't gone in 5 minutes, I'd call his new fiancée and tell her everything. That got him moving. He grabbed some essentials, mumbling about coming back for the rest later. I told him to coordinate with the landlord because I wouldn't be letting him in again. He slammed the door on his way out. The next day, I changed the locks, put his remaining stuff in trash bags by the dumpster, blocked his number, his email, his social media. But the nightmare was far from over. When I checked my accounts more carefully, I realized just how bad the damage was. Over $2,700 charged to my cards in just the last 2 months. Subscriptions I never approved, restaurant tabs that would make you sick, and that freaking ring, the one that wasn't even for me. I called the bank, but most charges were too old to dispute. They were made with a card he was authorized to use, after all. I'd been so incredibly stupid. That was 3 months ago. What's happened since then is a whole other level of crazy that I'll save for my next update. First update. Alright, y'all, let me hit you with the next chapter of this dumpster fire I call my life. First off, mad props for all the comments and messages on my last post. I didn't think anyone would care about my train wreck, but here we are. A lot of y'all were asking what happened after I kicked Ramsey to the curb. So, grab your snacks, cause things are about to get real messy. The night after I booted Ramsey out, sleep was a no-go. I kept checking the door, even though I had the deadbolt locked tight. Around 3 a.m., I got a flood of texts from him, ranging from pissed, "How dare you embarrass me by throwing my stuff outside?" to guilt-tripping, "We need to talk like adults," to straight-up pathetic, "I have nowhere to go." I ignored every single one. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed a day to process and figure out just how screwed I was financially. I made some coffee and sat down with all my bank statements, credit card bills, and a notebook. What I found made me want to hurl my coffee across the room. It wasn't just the $2,700 I'd noticed at first. Digging deeper, I found small withdrawals, random purchases, subscription services I didn't even recognize. He'd been slowly draining me for months. The total damage was closer to $5,400. That's on top of the rent I'd been covering, plus the groceries, plus the utilities. I called the credit card company again, this time armed with a detailed list. The customer service rep felt bad but stood firm. Most of the charges were too old to dispute, and Ramsey had been an authorized user. The best they could do was remove him from the account and flag any pending charges. They suggested I file a police report if I wanted to take it further. I thought about it, seriously, but the idea of dragging this out, of seeing Ramsey again in court, of having to prove he'd spent my money without permission when, technically, I'd given him access, was just too much. I decided to suck it up and focus on getting my life back on track. That afternoon, I called a locksmith to change the locks. It cost $170 that I definitely couldn't afford. But the thought of Ramsey waltzing back in with his key was worse than the hit to my already maxed out card. While the locksmith was working, I gathered all of Ramsey's leftover crap and shoved it into trash bags. His clothes. His stupid protein powder that had been hogging half my cabinet space. I texted him once, telling him his stuff would be by the dumpster for 24 hours, and after that, it was going to Goodwill. He showed up just as I was dragging out the last bag, perfect timing as always. He looked rough, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from the night before. I wondered for a second where he'd slept, then reminded myself it wasn't my damn problem anymore. He tried to talk to me, saying there were things I didn't understand, that Clover wasn't who I thought she was, that he'd been planning to break up with her. I just kept walking past him with the bags. When he grabbed my arm to stop me, I yanked away so hard I scraped my elbow on the brick wall. I told him if he touched me again, I'd call the cops. That shut him up, but I could feel him watching me as I went back inside. The locksmith finished up 20 minutes later, handed me my new keys, and I finally felt like I could breathe in my own apartment again. The next week at work was a freaking blur. I was exhausted, jumping every time my phone buzzed, and making dumb mistakes that my boss kept pointing out. By Friday, I'd caught up on some missed deadlines, but I was running on fumes. My friend Phelan invited me out for drinks, saying I needed to get back out there, but I couldn't afford it. I made up some excuse about being tired. The following Monday, I got called into my manager's office. I thought it was about that inventory report I'd messed up the week before, but it was way worse. They were restructuring. My position was being eliminated. They gave me 2 weeks' notice and a crappy severance package that wouldn't even cover next month's rent. I didn't cry in the office. I nodded, signed the papers, and walked back to my desk like everything was normal. Then, I locked myself in the bathroom stall and had a silent meltdown for 20 minutes. That night, I called my mom. We're not exactly close. She lives in Florida with her second husband, and we talk, like, once a month, but I needed to hear a parent tell me things would be okay. She felt bad, but wasn't exactly helpful, said I should never have let Ramsey move in without a ring on it first, asked if I'd thought about moving back home until I got back on my feet. Moving back to Florida to sleep on my mom's pull-out couch and listen to my stepdad's political rants? No freaking way. I spent my 2 weeks' notice applying for every job I could find, sent out 73 applications, got 6 responses, all requesting second-round interviews that never happened. The rejection emails started flooding my inbox the day I cleaned out my desk. The first week of unemployment, I still had a routine: wake up, apply for jobs, make a cheap lunch, apply for more jobs, go for a walk to save on heating, make dinner, watch YouTube, sleep, repeat. By week 2, my bank account was down to triple digits. I canceled Netflix, started taking shorter showers, ate ramen and eggs for most meals. I called the electric company to work out a payment plan, called my landlord and promised the rent would be a few days late. He wasn't thrilled, but said he'd wait until the 15th before charging a late fee. The 15th came and went. I sold my nice watch on eBay, sold some clothes on Poshmark, listed my television on Facebook Marketplace, but only got insulting offers. Then my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ramsey. He'd gotten a new phone or was using someone else's, said he needed to talk to me, that Clover had found out about us and dumped him, that he was sorry and wanted to explain. I blocked that number, too. But it rattled me. Not because I gave a crap about his problems, but because it reminded me how badly I'd screwed up by trusting him. I'd let this man into my life, into my home, given him access to my money, and he'd seen me as nothing more than a convenience, a backup plan, someone to take advantage of. By the end of the month, I was desperate. My landlord had started leaving voicemails about the rent. My electricity had been shut off for 48 hours before I scraped together enough to pay the minimum to get it turned back on. I'd eaten nothing but plain rice for 3 days straight because it was all I had left. I finally swallowed my pride and applied for temporary assistance. The whole process was humiliating, filling out forms detailing every part of my financial life, waiting for hours in a crowded government office, being told I made too much at my previous job to qualify for immediate help. They gave me a list of food banks instead. The next day, I went to one, stood in line with my ID and proof of address, accepted a box of canned goods and almost expired bread with a smile that felt like it might break my face, carried it home on the bus, feeling like everyone was staring at me even though nobody gave a damn. That night, I got an email. It was from a small warehouse that needed temporary help during their busy season. The pay was less than half of what I'd been making, but it was something. I replied, as soon as possible, had a phone interview the next morning, and started the following Monday. The work was physically brutal, 8 to 10 hours on my feet, lifting boxes, scanning inventory, working in either freezing cold or sweltering heat, depending on where in the warehouse I was assigned. My hands got calluses, my back ached constantly, and I came home too exhausted to even think about applying for better jobs. But I made enough to pay part of the rent, still not all of it, but my landlord agreed to another extension as long as I paid the late fees. Then, one evening, I came home to find an eviction notice taped to my door. Apparently, my partial payments weren't cutting it anymore. I had 30 days to pay in full or get out. I sat on my kitchen floor and just stared at the paper, too numb to even cry. That's when my neighbor knocked. She'd seen the notice and heard me come in, asked if I was okay. I wasn't, obviously, but I lied and said I was fine. She hesitated, then asked if I was looking for a roommate. Her cousin Mirabelle needed a place to crash for a few months while she saved up for her own apartment. If we split the rent 3 ways, it might work out for everyone. I'd never said more than 10 words to this neighbor before, but right then, she was a freaking angel. I said yes immediately. Mirabelle moved in 2 days later. She was quiet, paid her share up front in cash, and didn't ask questions about why I sometimes ate nothing but rice for dinner. We weren't exactly friends, but we coexisted peacefully in the increasingly depressing apartment. With Mirabelle's help, I managed to pay off enough of the back rent to stop the eviction process. I was still drowning in credit card debt, still working a job that paid barely above minimum wage, still eating like a college student during finals week, but I wasn't homeless, and that was something. Then, one day, about 3 months after I'd kicked Ramsey out, I was rushing to catch the bus to work when I ran into someone on the sidewalk. I stumbled back, mumbling an apology without looking up. Then, I heard my name. It was Ramsey, standing there like he'd been waiting for me. He was wearing a fast food uniform, the kind with the ugly polo shirt and visor. I tried to walk around him, but he stepped in my way, said he'd been trying to reach me, that he needed to talk to me, that he'd made a huge mistake. I noticed his phone was an ancient model, not the latest iPhone he'd always had before. Karma's a freaking witch, I guess. I told him I was late for work and pushed past him. He called after me, saying he'd come back, that he'd make things right. I didn't look back, just ran for the bus and made it just as the doors were closing. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I missed him or wanted him back, but because I was afraid he'd figured out where I lived, that he'd show up again. I wedged a chair under my bedroom doorknob, even though I knew it was probably stupid. The next morning, there was a letter in my mailbox, no stamp, just my name scribbled across the front. I recognized Ramsey's handwriting right away. I didn't open it, just tore it up and dropped the pieces into different trash cans on my way to the bus stop, but I knew he wouldn't give up that easily, and I was right. Second update. Hey, y'all. Time for another update. Thanks for all the supportive comments. Reading them on my bus rides to work has been one of the few good things lately. Some of y'all asked for more details about what happened after Ramsey started showing up again, so here we go. After I trashed Ramsey's letter, I thought maybe he'd get the message. Nope. For the next couple of weeks, I'd randomly spot him across the street from my building, at the bus stop near work, even at the laundromat where I'd started going because our building's machines were too damn expensive. He never came right up to me, just watched. Sometimes he'd wave or try to catch my eye. I'd pretend I didn't see him and walk faster. My temp job at the warehouse turned into a real nightmare, real quick. The managers kept making us work longer hours without telling us, so I'd show up expecting an 8-hour shift and end up staying for 12. My feet were always killing me, and I developed this sharp pain in my lower back that wouldn't quit. But I couldn't afford to quit, so I just popped whatever ibuprofen I could find and kept going. Mirabelle noticed. One night, I got home and literally couldn't stand up straight. She was making some kind of soup and offered me a bowl. It was the first real homemade food I'd had in weeks that wasn't plain rice or ramen. We sat at the kitchen table, and for the first time, we actually talked. Turns out Mirabelle had her own Ramsey story, different name, same con. It was kinda nice knowing I wasn't the only sucker who'd trusted the wrong dude. We started eating dinner together when our schedules lined up, just whatever we could scrape together from our sad pantry and the discount section at the grocery store, but it helped a lot. Then, one morning in late November, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. My throat was on fire, my head was pounding, and I could barely drag myself out of bed. I called work, barely able to croak out an explanation. My boss sighed real loud and reminded me that temp workers don't get sick days. If I didn't come in, I might not have a job when I felt better. I hauled myself to the bathroom, took my temperature with this old thermometer I found in the medicine cabinet, 103.5. That couldn't be right. I shook the thermometer and tried again, 103.8. I should have gone to urgent care. I know that now, but urgent care costs money, and I had exactly $27 in my bank account to last until payday. So, I took more ibuprofen, bundled up in every layer I owned, and somehow made it to the bus. I don't remember much about that day. I scanned boxes, I drank water from the fountain, I hid in the bathroom when I felt dizzy. Somehow, I made it to the end of my shift. I remember waiting for the bus home, shaking like crazy even though I was sweating like a pig. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground. Someone was shaking me, asking if I was okay. It was a teenage girl looking totally freaked out. I'd apparently passed out at the bus stop. She helped me sit up, asked if she should call someone. I said no, I was fine, just tired. I was anything but fine. I somehow got on the bus, made it back to the apartment building, made it up the 3 flights of stairs by practically crawling, and then I collapsed on the living room floor, still wearing my coat and boots. That's where Mirabelle found me when she got home from her evening shift. She later told me she thought I was dead at first. I was so pale and barely breathing. She managed to get me into bed, made me drink water, and put cold washcloths on my forehead all night. By morning, my fever had broken, but I felt like I'd been hit by a bus. Mirabelle had already called my work, telling them I had pneumonia and wouldn't be in for at least 3 days. I tried to argue. We both knew I'd probably lose my job, but she shut me down quick, said no job was worth dying for, especially one that paid so little. She was right, but being right doesn't pay the bills. I spent the next couple of days in bed, drifting in and out of sleep, stressing about money every time I was awake enough to stress about anything. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. It was the warehouse. I thought I was going to get fired, but instead, the HR person was calling to check on my pneumonia and tell me about their short-term disability policy. Turns out, Mirabelle had not only called in sick for me, but had also marched down to the warehouse in person, demanding to talk to someone about employee benefits. She'd raised enough hell that they'd actually looked into their own policies and found that even temp workers qualified for some basic protections. I got 5 paid sick days, 5. Not enough to fully get better, but enough to not end up back on the floor of a bus stop. When Mirabelle got home that night, I cried, really cried. It was the first time anyone had fought for me in forever. When I went back to work, things were different. My boss kept giving me the stink eye, probably waiting for me to keel over again, but my coworkers, people I'd barely spoken to before, kept checking on me, making sure I took breaks, offering to help with the heavy stuff. Word had gotten around about the girl whose roommate went off on HR. Meanwhile, the Ramsey situation took a new turn. The random sightings stopped, but the texts got worse. He'd somehow gotten a new number again or was borrowing phones and would send these long, rambling messages about how much he missed me, how Clover had ruined his life, how he'd been thinking about where it all went wrong. I blocked each new number as it came, but it was exhausting. Phelan suggested I change my number altogether. But that meant paying a fee I couldn't afford. So, I just kept blocking and ignoring. December rolled around, bringing even more money problems. The warehouse was busier than ever with holiday orders, which meant more hours, but also more pain. My back pain got so bad that I started popping the maximum dose of ibuprofen every day just to function. My teeth hurt nonstop. A molar had been bugging me for months, but dental care might as well have been a trip to freaking Fiji for all I could afford it. One super cold morning, I was waiting for the bus, stomping my feet to keep warm, when an older woman next to me started talking to me, just regular bus stop chit-chat. The weather, the late bus, the usual. Then she said she worked at a medical office down the street. I nodded, not really paying attention until she said something about their warehouse needing someone to reorganize it. I probably looked desperate because I immediately asked if they were hiring. She seemed surprised, but gave me the office manager's name and said I should bring my resume by. I thanked her, not expecting much. Random bus stop connections almost never work out, but I was desperate enough to try anything. That night, I spruced up my sad resume and printed it out at the library. The next day, I made a detour on my lunch break and walked into the medical office, asking for the manager by name. I thought they'd tell me to apply online or to leave my resume with the receptionist. Instead, I got led into a small office where a stressed-out woman was eating a sandwich at her desk. She glanced at my resume, asked about my background in logistics, and then asked when I could start organizing their supply area. It wasn't a full-time job, just 20 hours a week to start, handling medical supply inventory and deliveries, but it paid $3 more an hour than the warehouse. The hours were flexible, and it involved actual skills instead of just killing myself physically. I took the job right then and there. For the next few weeks, I worked both jobs, mornings at the medical office, evenings at the warehouse. It was freaking hard, but for the first time in months, I could actually pay my bills on time. I'd get home totally beat, eat whatever Mirabelle had made. She'd started cooking for both of us when she realized how bad my health had gotten, and collapse into bed. By mid-January, I'd saved enough to ditch the warehouse job. On my last day, I felt nothing but relief as I turned in my badge. My boss seemed actually surprised. I think they thought I'd just put up with the awful conditions forever. One of my coworkers gave me a quick hug and said she was glad I got out. The medical office job wasn't fancy, But it was steady. The office manager kept giving me more hours as I proved myself. By February, I was working 35 hours a week and had even been given a little desk in the back where I could keep track of stuff on this ancient computer. With regular paychecks coming in, I started chipping away at the mountain of debt Ramsey had left me, $20 here, $50 there. It wasn't much, but watching the balances slowly go down made me feel like I was in control again. Mirabelle and I got into a good groove. We weren't besties or anything, but we got along and understood each other. She'd started dating this quiet guy, and sometimes he'd eat dinner with us. It was nice to have someone in the apartment who wasn't Ramsey-shaped. Things were slowly getting better. My back still hurt, my tooth still throbbed sometimes, but I was moving forward one step at a time. Then, Valentine's Day came along. I'd been trying to ignore all the heart-shaped stuff in stores, the lovey-dovey commercials, the couples planning romantic nights. Rosie and her boyfriend were going out, so I had the apartment to myself. I was gonna have a super exciting night of frozen pizza and whatever new shows were on Netflix. I was halfway through my sad pizza when someone knocked on the door. Not a normal knock. A loud, almost crazy pounding. I froze. Pizza slice halfway to my mouth. It had to be Ramsey. No one else would be that dramatic. I snuck to the door and looked through the peephole. Yep, there he was, holding what looked like flowers and a small box. I backed away from the door, hoping he'd think no one was home. He knocked again, then called my name, said he knew I was in there, that he'd seen the light under the door, that he just wanted to talk, to explain, to make things right. I stayed quiet, my heart beating fast. After what felt like forever, I heard him sigh. Something hit the floor outside, the flowers, I guess, and then I heard footsteps walking away. When I was sure he was gone, I slowly opened the door. There was a bouquet of grocery store roses on the floor with a small velvet box and a card. I should have just kicked it all back into the hallway and shut the door, but I was curious. I picked up the box first. Inside was a ring, not an engagement ring, just a simple silver band with a tiny stone that might have been a diamond, but was probably fake. The card said, "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to start making it right. This is the ring I should have given you instead of her. I've changed. Please call me." I stood there in the doorway looking at this pathetic try at making up for what he did and felt nothing. Not mad. Not sad. Not even grossed out. Just empty. This guy had messed up my life and thought a cheap ring would fix it. I dropped the ring and card into the trash can by the elevator. Left the flowers for whoever wanted them. Went back to my apartment. Locked the door. And finished my now cold pizza. The next morning, I woke up to a text from a number I didn't know. It was Ramsey again, asking if I'd gotten his gift. I didn't block this one. Instead, I replied with 2 words, "Move on." Then, I blocked that number, too. February turned into March. The medical office kept giving me more hours and stuff to do. I paid off one of my smaller credit cards completely. Mirabelle and I painted the living room on a Sunday, covering the old, boring color with a soft gray that made the whole apartment feel cleaner. My mom called. Surprised that I seemed more like myself. She even said she'd help with my dental work if I came to visit for a weekend. I was still not sure about it. My stepdad and I had never gotten along, but the idea of finally fixing my tooth was tempting. And Ramsey, he finally seemed to get the message. The text stopped, the random showing up stopped. I looked at Clover's Instagram sometimes and saw she'd moved on with some other dude. Ramsey's page hadn't been touched in months. I was fixing things slowly, carefully, but surely, not back to where I was before. I don't think I'll ever be that person again. But somewhere new, somewhere stronger, even if I was more careful now. Final update. Alright y'all, this is the last chapter. Life went on, you know? My hours at the medical office went up to full-time with actual benefits. I finally got that tooth fixed during a weekend trip to my mom's place. Mirabelle and I signed another lease on the apartment even though she was basically living at her boyfriend's place by then. My credit score started creeping up. I even started putting a little money away each month for a rainy day. I even went on a couple of dates, but nothing serious. Trust doesn't just bounce back after it's been shattered to pieces. Then, last month, I got a text from Phelan. She'd run into Ramsey at a coffee shop, said he'd asked about me, but not in a creepy way, mentioned he was moving to Pittsburgh for a fresh start. I thanked her, but didn't think much of it. Ramsey moving away seemed like the best thing for everyone, which is why I was totally caught off guard when I opened my apartment door last week and found him standing there with a small gift bag. My first thought was to slam the door in his face, but he looked so different, clean-cut, healthier, wearing clothes that actually fit. He held up his hands right away, like he could tell I was about to freak out, and said he wasn't staying, that he was leaving town and just wanted to drop something off. I took the bag, but reluctantly. Inside was a small box and an envelope. The envelope had $1,500 in it. The box held a ring, that ring, the one he'd bought for Clover with my money, the one I'd seen in that Instagram post that kicked off this whole mess. He said that when Clover dumped him, she'd thrown the ring at him. He'd kept it, thinking he'd pawn it, but never did. He wasn't giving it to me as some weird love thing. He was giving back something that was mine since I'd paid for it, and he wanted me to decide what to do with it, keep it, sell it, toss it in the river. Ramsey said he had a job waiting for him in Pittsburgh, that he'd keep sending payments until he'd paid back everything he owed me, that he was truly sorry for everything, especially for saying those horrible things when I found out about Clover, that I deserved way better, and he hoped I'd found it or would find it soon. Then he just left, just a simple wave, and he was gone. The next day, I took the ring to a jeweler. It wasn't worth nearly as much as Ramsey had paid for it. The stone was smaller than it looked in the pictures, and the setting was nothing special. I got just under $1,000 for it, which went straight into my savings. So, that's it. That's the end of the Ramsey story. I'm doing all right now. The medical office gave me a small raise last month. Mirabelle did move in with her boyfriend, but I found a new roommate through a coworker. This quiet grad student who pays on time and doesn't steal my food. My back still hurts sometimes when it rains, a souvenir from my days at the warehouse. My credit score is still getting better. I still double-check the locks before bed sometimes, but I'm building something new, something steady. I don't know if Ramsey will stay on the right track. People can change, but it's rare, and it usually happens little by little, not all at once. Maybe he'll pay me back, maybe he won't. I've learned not to count on other people's promises. After all that mess with Ramsey, if I had to pick one thing I learned, it's this: protect yourself, protect your resources. It's easy to get caught up in the charm and the potential of a new relationship, but don't let that blind you to the red flags. Trust your gut when it tells you something's off, and don't be afraid to set boundaries, even if it feels awkward. Relationships should be built on respect and equality, not on one person carrying the other. Financial abuse is real, and it can leave you not only broke but also feeling like a total idiot. So, be smart, be careful, and don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Now, I'm curious. What did you guys think about my story? Did you see the red flags early on? What would you have done differently? I'm open to hearing your opinions, so hit me with your thoughts.